Today I'll be showing you how to make this nice little staircase right here. Now, the interesting thing about this staircase, which is actually over here somewhere. Nope, over here. Yes. So the interesting thing about this staircase, well, first let me just show you how to make it. So go to Objects, go to Search Bar down here, and then find the asset that you want to circularize. So for me, it was Castle Stair. No, just Castle. Yeah, there we go. Just find any old asset that you want to circularize, and then click on the arc tool. Let's find something a little bit less prominent, and then you just circularize it. Now, that's how you're supposed to do it. Well, supposed to is a weird word, because I don't think that this is an intended function of the arc tool. If it is not very polished. So this is the result, of course, and I did it with this nice little stair asset that I got from FA Castles, I believe. Now, the reason that I don't believe that this is an intended feature is because just the way that it wraps the textures sometimes is a little bit weird, and also the parameters that you're able to control are quite limited. So, and the only way to access it, by the way, which is weird in itself, is to see if you take an asset from the objects and you try to arc it, it automatically tries to search for walls within your asset folder. So if I go to Dragonville, it's only showing walls for the arc tool, right? That's how it's intended to work. It's supposed to wrap the texture for the wall. The way you get to treat an object like a wall is specifically by clicking on objects. So you get your object that you want to wrap. It can be any object. Then you have to go. You have to click on objects so that it generates objects for you, and it puts you into the object mode, and then you go to search, and you have to search the object that you want. So if I search bed A, right, and I have bed A, then if I go from this menu specifically through these two subcategories, object and then search, and then I go to walls, it will let me arc it, it will let me polygon it, it will let me just plain wall it. But the weird thing for each of these is that the normal parameters which you would be able to control for any one of these methods, right, is not what you would expect for someone who created this tool with like textured objects in mind. Because, I mean, if I control the thickness, it does the same thing that it does for the wall textures. It just rewraps the texture. But if the developers really intended for this to work like this, it's kind of odd because you can't change the object scale. For instance, if I go to scale and I've locked the scale, right, I can't just hop over to line and then do it, right? I also can't, you can change the endpoints, like with any polygon, or at least I think, yeah. So you can change the endpoints, but you can't change the thickness. Or not the thickness, you can't change the spacing is what I mean. Like these little individual divots in between the wall texture. You can't change that in the wall texture, obviously, but if the developers had intended for objects to be able to wrap like this as a wall would, then I would expect them to be able to like I would expect customizable parameters as far as the spacing between every single texture wrap goes, because every object, it's kind of arbitrary where you choose to space it, right? I mean, this looks like it has like a 10% gap between every single one of them, and I mean that's just a really arbitrary thing, because some textures, like if I do like fence or something, right? If I do fence the object, not the. So if I do something like this, and then I like custom angle it this way, and then I arc it, which I have to do by going to the search and then going to here, like I said. See, it will only connect at certain distances, because the minimum length of the asset is that much, and it doesn't like it's just arbitrarily choosing a space to put in between every single asset so that it creates a sloppy, a sloppy texture like this. Like, it's very arbitrary the way they choose to put the texture spacing, which is what leads me to believe, that it's not a true intended feature. Now, obviously, like, even if this isn't an intended feature, it does wonders for things like mage towers. As far as I know, there's no other way, unless you do it manually by putting a bunch of custom angles or like spriting it outside of this, like in paint.net or something. There's no way to get circular textures from objects like this, even though it is super useful. Now, the code for it. Oh yeah, and one other thing that leads me to believe this isn't an intended feature is that some DPS documents that I work with don't have, when I go to objects and then I search and then I try the arc tool, it just doesn't work. I can't explain it, it just doesn't work. And sometimes when you go to when you try to edit any of these things, like editing this castle wall, sometimes it just doesn't have these drag parameters, right? Sometimes it just doesn't let you do it. And it's very odd when it decides not to let you do it, because it seems that when it decides not to let you do it, it's like on a DPS by DPS basis. Like, the specific DPS document that I'm working with determines, or at least influences somehow, whether or not this glitch activates. So that's in itself quite odd. Whether this is intended and that's a separate glitch, like whether, I don't know, it's weird. Either way, the code is obviously like already there. Whether it is glitched or not, the code sort of supports like arced object textures, and it's quite useful. So I imagine that the translation to get it as an actual feature with simple parameters like the spacing between object wrapping, I think that it wouldn't be too much of a labor task. Now, obviously, this is just me asking for free features, which, for a $15 product, I think that I've got my money's worth. But it would just be really nice to see objects which act as like walled textures. I would like to see that put in as either a more polished or more official feature. But anyways, that's how you make a circular staircase. Sorry that I went on that tangent, but it's quite interesting to me whether or not this was intended as a feature or whether I just stumbled across it by pure luck. So yeah. Oh, also, in case you're wondering about like how I got the staircase shadow, it's just these are the parameters that I use: 2 drop shadows. And then for the ending bit over here, I used what's the asset? This is, oh, it's because I'm not under folders. Yeah, I just used castle tower stairs. Shoutouts to the FA, by the way. Whatever people are responsible for making all these FA textures, you guys are great. So, once again, just search bar, search whatever you want. Could be boat. And then shoutouts to Paper Style, by the way, as well. Love them. And then you just arc it. Only weirdly specifically able to be done through the search. You have to click on object and then click on search and then click on arc. So that's how you do it. It's very strange, and I don't think that it was intended, but I would love to see it added as an official feature. Alright. It's 7 a.m. and I have school in like 3 hours. Okay, so while I was recording that video, I also noticed some other like weird quirks that you can do by manipulating, like treating walls as objects, for instance. So if I go to walls, right, I go to walls and I search walls. So if I search like stone, I should come up with stone wall, right? And then if I go to objects, I can place the wall as if it were an object. Now, this search bar manipulation is also manipulatable for like turning a wall into a texture like this or like this. So I think that in the wider also, this glitch happens all the time. I'm pressing enter, can't complete the shape. I don't know what that even does. I can't complete the shape. I can't. Oh, there we go. Okay, it let me escape out of it. Sometimes it just doesn't even let me escape out of it, and I have to reopen like the entirety of my DPS. But the fact that I can go to search bar and then search for a wall and then treat it like anything. Yeah, that's obviously not intended, right? Or maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe they're just next level meta. But I can go and I can treat a texture. This is where it gets weird. I can treat a texture like this castle rock tile. If I search for it, castle rock, casterly rock, castle rock. I can place it as an object. When would this ever be useful? I'm not sure, but it's something you can do using the search bar glitch or intended feature, whatever it is. So that's just a weird little quirk. I don't know if this helps the developers like figure out the coding behind it or anything. You can treat it exactly as you would an object, which is weird and doesn't seem intended. But I mean, that's just something that my memory was jogged when I was making that other video. So hopefully this helps the developers figure out, if they do decide to look at this dumb little video, it helps them figure out how to like transform this from glitch into feature. Thank you for the product. I enjoy it a lot. And I have successfully procrastinated an additional 17 minutes. I should probably get started on my homework.